What if the version of you that feels most peaceful, most clear, most yourself isn't actually something that you have to build? What if it's just something that you get to remember? Welcome to The Authentic Path. I'm your host, Dr. Vanessa Calderon, Harvard-trained physician and healer. I integrate science and ancestral wisdom to support you in creating the success you desire in all areas of your life. I'm so glad you're here. Let's get started. Today's conversation is one that I have been looking forward to for a while because I get to bring you my sweet, sweet friend, my dear colleague, and someone that holds so much wisdom in her lineage. I'm bringing you something that we talk about a lot on the show, practices that sort of bring us home to ourselves in many different ways, really just honoring the sacred journey that we're all on. My guest today has been living this life with the intersection of rigorous evidence-based medicine and ancient spiritual wisdom. Dr. Rashmi Schramm is a board-certified family physician with over 20 years of clinical experience. She's also a national board-certified integrative wellness coach, a Chopra-certified primordial sound meditation teacher, Ayurvedic lifestyle teacher, and a Duke-certified integrative health coach. Yes, she's a big nerd with a ton of certifications, which is totally my jam. And she is also certified in Yoga Nidra. I met her at a physician coaching conference a long time ago, and I totally bonded with her because I sat through one of her Yoga Nidra sessions, and this woman was life-changing. Her Yoga Nidra was incredible. It turned out that's exactly what I needed. I needed to slow down. And we immediately bonded, and we have been friends ever since. And I just love her so much. And I feel so grateful that I get her to bring her here to you. Okay, let's jump in. Dr. Rashmi Schramm, welcome.
My gosh, what a deep honor to be here, Dr. Vanessa Calderon. Thank you.
You're so welcome, sweet friend. I want to get started by maybe just talking about the very beginning. You know, I sort of listed out all of your credentials when I introduced you, but I really want everyone to understand what's underneath those credentials. You were a practicing Western physician, but you also come from a long lineage of folks that have practiced meditation and Ayurveda just in your life. Can you just share a little bit about what brought you to where you are today?
Absolutely. So I'm an immigrant. I was born in India and I lived there until I was 12. And those years were actually spent in a huge extended family setting, which is not uncommon, certainly in the 1970s when I was growing up in India. And amongst that was the head of that household was my grandmother, the matriarch, who held within her deep, deep ancestral wisdom, deep actual medical wisdom as well. Her father had been an Ayurvedic physician who also understood Western medicine, and he lived to be very old as far as Indian standards go, even back in the day, to the point where I even remember my great-grandfather. And so there was a lot of this deeply held knowledge and wisdom that throughout my parents' lifetime had been actually wiped away by the British, colonization. And so there was this sensation of something missing, but something that's also already there. And my grandmother was very open about sort of making sure that I understood some of the mysticism, some of the understandings of who and what we are, even from like a really young age. And I am so deeply grateful for that. It is so awe-inspiring for me that she had the courage to do all of those things. And she lived to be almost 90 and has this insane life story of where she had to, she was widowed at 24. She had 4 kids. She had lost one of her kids, was pregnant with the 5th, and had to flee her home for safety with the kids. But ultimately lived this very full life and focusing on education and entrepreneurship and all of these things. And so I grew up like this. And then, interestingly, at age 12, we moved to the United States. We immigrated to the US, my nuclear family and I did. And we actually lived in a tiny coal mining town in the Appalachian Mountains in southwestern Virginia. So the culture could not have been more different. Safety required assimilation into that culture very quickly. And 12-year-olds, it's hard to stand out anyway. So, subconsciously, you don't really recognize it. But of course, you have to abandon all of the things that make you different and try to look the same or act the same or say the same things as all the other kids. And so I spent probably the next, 15 years really assimilating. And I did a great job at it. as we often can do, we can adapt to some pretty amazing things. And I found myself in college, actually. I was a kind of a closet meditator. I found a group in college and we would get together on Sundays and meditate. And I would never tell any of my friends any of these things because I was applying to medical school and I didn't want to be seen as weak or whatever I thought, the perception was. And so this idea, this thread that's always felt like home, whether it's an Ayurvedic wisdom, this idea of yoga, which is also meditation, that has already always sort of been lit within me. And I think the arc of my life, which is probably similar to yours, is that at various points in our lives, we've had to abandon those particular knowings in order to assimilate and or get to the next level to be safe in the world in which that we are functioning in at that time. And so it is such a great privilege that at some point we actually get to take a pause if we have enough resources and just say like, what do I want? Which is a huge privilege. And I started to ask that question, even though I was really scared to ask that question, probably 15, maybe 20 years ago when my kids were little and I was working a lot. My husband was working a lot. Everyone around me, like most of my friends were physicians. They were all so burned out. They were all so unhappy yet, right? Like I had the house, I had the cars, I had the husband, I had the kids. And I'm like, is this all there is? And I think that's a very important point for all of us to get to. Is this all there is? And once I started to pay attention to that, I started to kind of look into, okay, well, could I study Ayurveda? Like, what does that look like? Could I bring in some of that stuff? Like, I know some of it, but I don't really understand it from an based point. And so I really started to make that more formal. And that was my gateway drug, Ayurveda, into meditation, into yoga nidra, into yoga therapy, all of those things. And so it wasn't a pretty linear anything like that. It was a very curvy, where, like a windy path. But it's the path that we all have to lead to some degree to kind of lead us here. And truly, today, I feel like I'm at the beginning of the beginning.
That's so powerful. So much of what you said, I just want to touch on. One is the beauty of having your grandmother as a matriarch of your family that was able to pass down that wisdom to you. One thing that I have been reflecting on is the blessings of being an immigrant or first generation in this country, because what that means is we can still be deeply connected to ancestral work from a lived experience from someone that was alive that can pass down stuff to us, which is really, really powerful. And I think about, your kids or my kids that growing up as sort of your kids are growing up as first generation, my kids are growing up as second generation. And how do we ensure that we're passing down the wisdom, the stories, and as a blessing, we since we've done a lot of our own healing work, we don't necessarily need to pass down the trauma, but how do we make sure we pass down the wisdom and the healing and really just celebrating the matriarchs of our family and the matriarchs of all families across the world that have held so much medicine in their bodies, so much wisdom in their bodies? One of the things you mentioned is how you have sort of walked this path and hold so much so much wisdom, Western medicine, Ayurveda, Yoga Nidra, all of those things, and kind of your journey there. I'm curious, as you were on that journey that brought you to where you are now, because the Rashmi that I know holds all of these things. And when I look at you, it feels seamless, like you're holding all of these things seamlessly. But my sense is that on the journey there was that there may have been some resistance, maybe some fear, maybe resistance from peers, maybe from yourself in sort of bridging these two worlds together. What was your experience with that?
There was definitely resistance. There was a long period of time during my first meditation teacher training that I didn't tell anyone. And it was like this 18-month program. And towards the last 6 months, it was like contractual kind of, like nobody would check, but it was like, you got to teach. Like, if you want this certification, you've got to go out there and teach. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to have to start talking about it and I'm going to have to tell everyone. And it was this really scary thing. And so I actually just started in my medical office. I've always worked in an office and the staff loved it. So I would offer it in the morning, just like a quick, 5-minute meditation. And then I would offer like another meditation during lunch. And it started to really word started to get around. And so people from neighboring offices would pop in and it just was this wild thing. And then someone adjacent to that heard that I was looking for opportunities to teach. And so they invited me to go to my local YMCA to teach meditation there. And so I was teaching there on Tuesday nights for, completely free for many, many years, just kind of putting in the reps and like really starting to understand like, what is it that I need to be in order to hold this space? And it became like so clear to me that it doesn't matter what tone of voice I use, what words I use, anything like nothing like that matters if I'm teaching, just a mantra meditation or yoga nidra meditation. The only thing that matters is what is it that I am experiencing in that moment? Like, am I in flow? Am I able to hold myself in a grounded state where I can also be expansive? And that's it's such a relief, right? To figure that out finally. I think I actually was getting a prescription for beta blockers the first couple of years that I was teaching at the Y. Oh, I forgot about that. Gosh, I haven't thought about that in so long. So that's how far we've come on this journey over the last 15 years, where I just was so nervous to teach something that felt so precious and gem-like to me that now, but it's also about putting in the reps. And it's also about, this idea of being a witness to ourselves so that we can understand our own patterns, so we can let go of what's not working and we can lean into what is really true and aligned. And so I would say it was definitely not seamless. There were lots of times, there was even a doctor once who left a comment, and I'm trying to think of exactly what this was on something. But I still remember, even though it was like 8 years ago, it was like, why don't you go hawk your turmeric somewhere else? And so it took me a really long time to come back from that. And so, yeah, people have lots and lots of thoughts and feelings when you go against kind of society or what is expected of you. And that is okay.
So fascinating because turmeric is the best. Everyone's using it for anti-inflammatory properties now, but people just don't know. So the fear that you're naming is so fascinating because I just want to let the audience in on one other thing. 15 years ago, you had to take a beta blocker to teach this. And now you're like actively signing up for like improv classes because you want to get better at like having fun and doing all these types of things. And so you're like actively choosing to do things that 15 years ago you were taking a beta blocker to do. I just want to like name
Yeah,
that.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's so interesting.
The thing that you said about the fear, was the fear a combination of, is this going to be something that people laugh at? They judge me for talking about this. Or was the fear more of just like public speaking in general? Or was it specifically that you were bringing something that was so reverent to you out into the world, something that you had guarded for so long? Because you were saying you were taking meditation classes in secret when you were applying to med school.
Yeah, it was the second part of this. It was the latter part of your, suggestion there. I had been speaking publicly and was presenting and teaching at Lunch and Learns and all the different things and never necessarily felt very nervous about that. But it was this particular space in which, in my mind, I thought meditation teachers should speak in a certain way, be judged in a certain way, or perceived in a certain way, like, right? Like, which, yes, it is the exact opposite of what we are supposed to be doing. But that was a subconscious pattern that had kept me safe over the years of making sure that I was fitting into other people's expectations of how I should behave. But I think I had to go through that. I had to go through that to be able to let it go. There was no other way to learn it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's sort of fascinating, right? Because you came into the United States, into this small little village, and somewhere deep inside you, your subconscious knew, or maybe it was your soul's contract to be a healer in this life. And the way to do it in a way that was safe was to go through the Western medicine route. And then along the way, you're like, hold on a second, something is misaligned here. I'm missing something. And then you found your way back to the teachings of your grandmother, the teachings of your ancestors, which is so beautiful that you now integrate that. And it sort of takes me to the next thing I kind of want to talk about, which is what you named about meditation teachers are supposed to look a certain way and speak a certain way. I think the field of consciousness and the field of meditation, just honestly, like ancient mysticism and was not necessarily like devoid of the patriarchal systems. And when we normally look back at a lot of those teachings, what we see is the same thing that we see across all ancient cultures, which is men teaching it in a very specific way. And in our mind, it's like very stoic and like this and calm and this tone of voice. I think it leaves so much like where women can't see themselves in those teachers. And so are they not supposed to be teachers? And I'm curious along your journey, I mean, you are someone that has so many more credentials than a lot of other people I know in this space, and someone who holds this wisdom and teaches it so beautifully every time I've seen you speak or teach on this, it's so powerful. And yet you're a woman. And so I'm curious on your journey through all of this, how have you sort of reconciled that?
Oh, what a great question. There is no recent history of women being the preeminent teachers. Even when you look at yoga, Patanjali the sage or the set of sages is viewed as a male. And one of the things my grandmother would do was to teach me certain mantras that were only supposed to be passed down to boys, for example, and certain wisdoms that were only supposed to be held by boys at certain ceremonies, for example. And so she was, she had this idea of the inequity that existed. And so my lived experience was vastly different than anyone else's, obviously, but my lived wisdom as a little Indian girl was just different because of her lived experience and therefore like my father's lived experience. I always say my dad is the first feminist I really ever met. Continues to be that way. He's in his 80s and he's always sort of a champion and an ally for women. And so that part of it, my lived experience, it really did not hit me until I went off to college and then I was like, wait, like your parents don't treat you the same as your brother? Like that's crazy. That's wild. And so I think historically, women have been tried to be erased. And then my lived experience, how lucky am I that my soul chose this family, that my lived experience was one of equity with my brother. And I didn't know any different at that time. And so it felt natural that I could be a leader. It was never questioned that I could be a leader. And yet I do know very much so that the patriarchy is alive and well and certainly trying to make a comeback in this day and age.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's such a blessing that you were raised with the sense of equity. And what I always find so fascinating, by the way, your dad and my dad should meet. They'd become BFFs instantly. They're both like super into the space and
Yes.
huge advocates for women and women's rights. I also agree with you that my dad is a huge feminist. And what I just find so fascinating is that even though we were born using your language, we chose parents who tended to support us. What's fascinating is that there's still social programming. So the society you still didn't see teachers that looked like you, for example, whenever you were going through all of your teachings. And I wonder how that colored the way you were able to show up and your sense of like feeling like an actual authority in this space.
Oh gosh, big time. That's why I needed the beta blocker, right? Because I was like, who am I to go teach this? Like it was all the subconscious programming, of course. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. I need to sound a certain way. I need to have a certain cadence to the way that I talk. And it was exactly what you mentioned, which is, there were all these male figures. And here I was, a woman in my 30s. I'm like, what am I doing? Like, guys, like, what am I doing? Like, am I way out of my league? And to a certain degree, I was. I mean, who am I to do that? And then when you can flip it to like, why not me? The energy changes.
Anyway, I think it's so beautiful. And I guess that just came up for me because as I was on my own journey, I realized maybe about 10 years ago that I was no longer, like, my soul was no longer being called towards teachers that fit that old kind of mold, like typical older male. And this is no shade by any means on men. I was just looking for equity and diversity. And I knew in my body, I knew that there was no reason why women couldn't be teaching this. And so I remember starting to find people like Tara Brach, for example, and other incredible women that I just consider wisdom holders and just totally navigated towards them because I think it's just a big piece of history that has been left out it's just like now, whenever you advocate for equity in the workspace, when it comes to like gender equity, for example, why? Because we're leaving like the neurodiversity and we're leaving all of the wisdom of 50% of the population, which is why it's so important to have so much diversity. And I think one of the reasons I've always been drawn to your teachings is because you bring in all of the teaching, all of this wisdom through your lens of lived experience of a mother, of a woman, of someone that had to navigate all of this space. And I think that's just a whole another layer of like experience and perspective that you're bringing into your teachings. Whether it's conscious or not, it's just present. And I just really value that.
I received that, and I want to honor you in that same way because I think, your lived experience, we've lived some parallel lives. You're younger than me. And yet there's some parallels in those lives that I think can't be lost on anyone who's listening to this conversation or have ever met you and I together. I think, this idea of being allowed to have this kind of ancient wisdom flow through you, that you're worthy enough for it to flow through you. And it's safe enough to be able to, to share it and to be able to teach it from not from a place of expertise, but from the place of like curiosity and beginner's mindset of like, what if, what if it all works out? What if this is something that's helpful to you, for example?
That's powerful. It's so true. You've known me for a while now, and you've sort of been witness to my growth in all of this, and me sort of coming home to my sort of inner authority. And what's so fascinating is what you're naming about who am I to sit and teach this. And I'll share my experience on another day, but I want to come back to, well, actually, let me just share one thing now, which is the more and more I came home to myself and all of my own kind of the wisdom that lived in my body and the lineage, I didn't actually think that there was anything there to teach because it just felt like it just felt so obvious to me. And then when people were like, oh my God, that's so interesting, tell me more, or what do you mean by that? Or the things that, you grow up just learning, like how we're connected to the earth or how to be in right relationship with the earth or how to reconnect to so many other parts of us. It was so fascinating to me because then I started thinking, wow, I am the person that is now sharing the things that I used to learn from my elders, like now I get to share those things. And there was a moment where I was like, wait a second, am I old enough to do that? Am I wise enough to do that? Am I actually the person sharing that? And coming back to a place of like, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. And also, I don't think I need to know the answer. If I can share something that's going to be of service to somebody else, then why the heck not? Because I think there's ego on both of those sides, right? Like the ego of like, oh, I know what's best. I'm the elder. And then the ego of like, oh, but why me? Like two sides of the same coin. And if you can release that and just come from a place of curiosity of like, well, if I can offer something that's of service, let's do it. Like I'm just passing down wisdom that's come through me. None of this is my own. It's all stuff that comes from like thousands of years before me that I just get to pass down.
Oh, so good. I am like vigorously nodding my head over here. I think that's exactly right. It's when we accept our role. And I have this funny story that I share sometimes. It was at like the thick of COVID, and one of my college girlfriends who lived in Manhattan, she still lives in Manhattan, wrote me a text that was like, you got to find me some kind of TED Talk. My entire family is being such assholes right now. Like, what kind of TED Talk can I show them to make sure that they're not assholes? So so I sent her a yoga nidra recording. She was like, what the fuck is this? And 2 days later, she called and she was like, Rush, you have this in your back pocket and you're not sharing it. Do you not realize how much suffering is going on right now? And I was like, what do you mean? Like, I didn't think yoga nidra even worked online. Like, I don't know how that would even work. And so she started to kind of get a group of people together. And on Saturday mornings and Sunday mornings, I would just do like these free yoga nidra sessions for a few weeks. Whenever I had time, I would do them. And I think it was like 4 or 5 weeks later, people were like, what's your Venmo? Like, I just want to Venmo you. And I'm like, no. Like, that would take the meaning of this away, all these different like ego-based types of things. But anyway, they started Venmoing me and it just kind of took off from there. But it almost never took off because I had this sensation of like, it has to be in person. It has to be in this certain way. It has to look a certain way. But, whatever it was, it was very low stakes. I almost kind of think I did it to irk her a little bit, but I also was like, maybe it's not them, is what I said. And so maybe just look inside. And so, but it really, she changed the trajectory. And sometimes I think those people come into our lives for those kinds of reasons. I mean, for a variety of reasons, but those are those sliding door, glass door moments of like, oh yeah, like I would never have shared this publicly if she hadn't been like, what do you mean? Why are you not doing this? And then she was a leader in her community, she still is, and she just started to get people together. And I was like, what is Zoom? I don't know what Zoom is. And so
Oh my gosh, that's
yeah.
powerful. Let's talk a little bit about your actual work because you brought in Yoga Nidra, and Yoga Nidra is sort of a form of meditation that I've experienced through you. And so many of the other things that you do, it's like I think I may have read this on your website, which is you supercharge coaching with meditation. I think you may have said that. Whether you said it or not, that's what I think you do. But one of the things I want to talk about is what the space of meditation allows us access to. We use these terms of like consciousness, like you're able to access a different level of consciousness. And I'm curious for you, is that how you would define what meditation gives us access to? If not, how would you define it?
So meditation to me, very simple definition, is a formal practice of mindfulness. And mindfulness to me is the practice of paying attention to the present moment with curiosity and without judgment, which is what you and I are doing right now. And it's actually kind of difficult to do most of the time. And so as a formal practice of mindfulness, meditation is simply moving from activity into stillness, or from activity into silence, whatever you want to choose. And that stillness and that silence is where our true selves or our higher selves live. And so it's a way for us to access something that we can't access through the thinking mind, through the intellect alone. So that's a simple way of looking at it. I mean, there's always all the physiological changes that happen. Now we have thousands of studies. But ultimately, if we can just jump into some of the woo stuff, from the yogic perspective, these ancient seers cognized, 4, 5, 6,000 years ago, what consciousness was. And they created these hymns or these mantras that were very, very specific to reaching these higher states of consciousness and these very specific exercises. And they would pass them down from teacher to student to teacher to student, right? Like it was passed down for generations until about maybe, 3,000 years ago. I've already mentioned Patanjali's Yoga Sutras codified it. And the idea of all of yoga is to reach higher states of consciousness. I mean, oftentimes in the West, we think of it as just the postures or the asanas, and certainly it is a part of the 8-limbed part of yoga. But it is not limited to those asanas. It is a way for us to move into higher and higher states of consciousness. And it's a way of living. And so I kind of think of this as, how can we bring this knowing, this remembering of who and what we are into our daily lives? Because otherwise, what is even the point of it? Like if we become hermits, which I really want to do sometimes, to like withdraw completely and go into a cave. I do want that sometimes. And that's fine for a certain period of time. But if I didn't come out and actually live my life, I would have no growth.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say is the base purpose of yoga is to get into a point of stillness, because in that place of stillness is where you connect to your highest self. And when you connect to your highest self, you're connecting to a higher level of consciousness. And the more you're practiced in this, the higher levels of consciousness that you can access. Is that right?
That's exactly right. Yeah. And it's a process, right? So if it's okay with you, I'll just kind of talk very briefly about the Yoga Sutras and kind of the 8-pronged approach of Patanjali's yoga. So there's the yamas and the niyamas, which are ways of living, right? So certain abstinences, certain ways in which we observe ourselves. So there's that. The third part is asanas, which I think everyone listening probably is aware of. They've been to a yoga class or probably practice yoga very regularly. The fourth limb is pranayama or breath work, which is incredibly important. And then you start going into these subtler and subtler states. And so then go into pratyahara, which is withdrawal of the senses, like where you're not constantly like, the dopamine hits don't need to be there. Like you're practicing watching the dopamine hit need to come out. And then also you're practicing being okay without it. And then you go even deeper and deeper and deeper. And then you've got, dharana, which is concentration. And then you've got dhyana, which is this meditative awareness. And then that final state is samadhi, which is this like all-knowing, blissful remembering of who and what we are.
Beautiful. And can you get to samadhi in one yoga session, the more you've practiced? Let's say you've been practicing for 20 years. Can you access that there?
100%. You don't even need to know yoga. I mean, that's the funny part is the British tried to wipe it out, right? Wipe it out completely. They burned down any place that was teaching yoga. They banished it. They banished Ayurveda. They only allowed Western medicine to be taught, or any kind of, Eastern ideas were stupid and old and all of these things. And so yet here it is, totally survived. And the truth is everyone listening has had that sensation of remembering who and what they are. Maybe when they looked into their dog's eyes, they looked at a sunset, they were on a run, they were on a roller coaster. Like, we don't have to be in meditative states. This is just a very sort of like, it's an engineered way. It's a whole system to get there very reliably, if you will. And so we naturally have that capacity to be in samadhi at any time. And one of the things my yoga teacher would say, you're going to get a body and you're going to go through the curriculum that you need to go through in this lifetime. And you are going to forget everything about this way of being. And you can remember it at any time.
Yeah. In fact, I think you've used the word remembering a couple of times. And I think that is so important for us just to spend some time there because, especially that this last kind of example that you gave, where our soul comes back into this world. This is one way to think about what's happening, right? One belief, and I'm not here to tell anybody what to believe, but this is one belief that your soul is choosing to come back into this world and has a human body because that's the only way that it can function in this planet on this three-dimensional plane. So then you choose a 3D body. And when you come into that body, part of the curriculum is remembering again. So you forget everything that you once knew. However, that wisdom lives in your body somewhere. So when you read something and all of a sudden it resonates with you, that sense of resonance, I experience that as a remembering. Like, why does something resonate with me like that? Ah, okay, maybe that's a remembering. And I just think that that's really important. As an aside, I remember when I was a kid, my dad is a mystic and he had all these super cool books in his home office. And I remember when I was a kid, I would go in there by myself and I would just like stroll through the books. I was like 6 years old, 7 years old. And like I would just pull them out and start scrolling through them. Why was I interested in this stuff that like I didn't even know? Like I wouldn't even have had I wouldn't even know what this word meant. I didn't have the vocabulary yet. I was like 6 years old. But there was something, some energetic frequency of the language of the books, of the stuff that was being spoken in those books and being taught that called to me. And it's like the same thing with like, I don't know if I've ever shared this with you, Rosh, but as a young kid, I was really deeply drawn to Egyptian history, mythology, and hieroglyphics. So much so that I taught myself how to read hieroglyphics when I was like, I think in the third grade. And now when I look back, I'm like, my gosh. Hello, resonance. Hello, remembering. Like, I guess I'm just saying that because the point of samadhi or experiencing this beautiful bliss or this elevated level of consciousness is available to everyone. And we can do it at any time. And I'm wondering, what do you think is the purpose? Like, why? Why should we do that?
Great question. So I think it's important to reiterate what you said. There are no gatekeepers. Yoga is a method. There are so many other methods. There are no gatekeepers. This is who and what you are. So that's the first thing to remember, that this is yours, right? Anyone listening, this is yours. No one has to help you get there. There are always teachers. There are always helpers along the way, but we can get there. Like, it's because that's our true nature, right? Like, so the why of it is such a great question. So, in the West, we often think about sort of like, the self-actualization is the highest of the pyramids, of how we can kind of get there. We're actually doing the work we want to do. We're totally aligned. But really in the East, it takes it one other way, which is like self-realization. And that is the ultimate reason that we are here on this planet living out this particular curriculum. And that is what helps us to live a more aligned, more blissful, more service-oriented life, because the ego is looking for certain things. The ego is not bad. We have to have an ego. But at the same time, if that is not what is leading the way, if there is a higher self and a higher purpose, we can create enormously more impact than we can if we go at it from an egoic perspective.
That's fascinating. And I'll tell you, in the Colombian pre-Hispanic traditions, Mazatec people, the Maya people, there was a belief of like every day was, and every year on your birthday, it was like the wish was for you to get to know yourself at a deeper level. It's like the concept of self-realization that you're naming, because the belief was that you never get to know yourself deep enough as you live. And the deeper you get to know yourself, the more you get to release the parts of you that are not you, and the more you get to remember who you are, and the more you get to be in service from that place. And it was always, this is so fascinating that you say that, because I do think in the Western world is, the top of the pyramid, and we're talking about the pyramid is Maslow's pyramid, Maslow's hierarchy, right? It's like the very top of the pyramid is self-actualization. Where are you the happiest? And it's in Western, it's very individualized. And in the traditions that I come from, and it sounds like where you're coming from, and truthfully, it's many ancient traditions, not just ours, which is the top of the pyramid is not to be in service to you, it's to be in service to the world, it's to be in service to community. It's like you get to know yourself so deeply and you tap into this higher level of consciousness, because guess what happens when you do? You realize, whoa, at this level, I understand that we are all connected. When we are at this level, and then it's like a deeper yearning to be in service, because when you're in service to everyone, you're in service to yourself, and there's no disconnection.
Yeah, mic drop. Absolutely.
Okay, so here we are talking about this, and I think a lot of people listening are interested. Yes, I want to tap into that. How do I access samadhi? How do I access these higher levels of consciousness? And we know, like you said, there's no gatekeepers. And I just want to say that one more time, because I come from a background where there's a lot of religion, organized religion, and there were people at the top of that organized religion, and they're the people closest to quote unquote God. And the only way to get to God is to get through them. And that is an example of gatekeeping. So again, I'm not here to tell you what to believe or not believe, but I also want you to know that you are your own authority. Everyone is their own authority. And the reason why the concept of resonance matters so much is because, and I say this all the time on my podcast, don't take my word for it. Go and practice and try it for yourself and see what you experience. And I want to say the same thing about this higher consciousness, because I guess before we talk about that, let me ask you, what do you think gets in the way? Everybody wants access to it. So what's getting in the way?
The world, I mean, the modern world, hedonic treadmill, the world of achievements, the world of more. There's always something else for us to do other than sit down to meditate. Like there is, even 15 years down the road, it is still, I'm like, oh, I could actually do XYZ. But that thought will still pop up from time to time. And so it is the idea of giving it any amount of importance in this world, because we live these really busy, hectic lives that are full lives. We need to live those kind of lives. But, what amount of priority do we want to give to this? That's really the question here. And there's no right or wrong. But if we start to pay attention, and we can start really small, like we can just decide we're going to go outside and look at the sky for 5 minutes. We can decide we're going to, kind of just look at a candle and not need to do anything else in a dark room for 5 minutes. Like, all of these things are ways for us to practice some of these. It's very, very, very difficult to let go of wanting to do the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, especially even from a lived experience of like, you and I are very curious beings. We love to learn. And so there's always another podcast to listen to. There's always another book to listen to. There's always another book to hear. Like, there's so many different things that we could be learning that sometimes we don't have time to actually reconnect back with ourselves.
Yeah, it's like we value doing so much that slowing down feels so invaluable that it's hard for us to prioritize slowing down. It's fascinating too, because here's something for all of you listening. The invitation is, again, don't take our word for it, but just try 1 minute a day. And after about 7 days of doing that, notice how you feel. And then decide if you want to add on to that or not. Add on 2 minutes, add on 3 minutes, and just notice how you feel. Notice how you show up for people. Notice how you show up for yourself. Notice how you shift the conversations, the little judgment that used to come in. Notice how you're now able to witness it, and maybe you don't engage with it anymore. Just start to notice those things, because, like every time I teach mindfulness or meditation or anything like that, especially to the folks that I work with, which are high performers, really smart leaders, entrepreneurs, it always starts from a place of like, this is going to bring you more focus. This is going to bring you more, and it's true, it will bring you more focus. It will bring you more productivity. It will bring you all of those things. but it's also going to make you just feel better. And it's going to help you tap into something so much bigger than you. And for me, that's my biggest draw. I think it's the coolest thing to know that we are connected to something so much bigger. And one way to tap in is just to slow down.
Oh, for sure. And that is what brought me in the door to meditation as well. And when I think back at all of my teachers and my teachers now, they have this incredible body of wisdom and their way of teaching this kind of, like whether it's yoga, meditation, but they also have an MD or a PhD or something else. Like I needed to have that to understand that they could traverse both worlds. For me, this way of not being one or the other, but being able to move in all the different ways that we need to move through life with was important to me at that point. And so it is kind of funny looking back at all of my teachers, they all have many degrees that I valued at that time.
Yeah, I feel you. It's like something to give both the right brain and the left brain a sense of safety. Like, okay, I will listen to you because you have these degrees. And honestly, my sense is that for both you and I, what attracts our audiences to us is the same thing. They can
That's right.
trust us because of our degrees, our credentials. And also, we have this other level of training and teachings and just lived experience. So I'm curious. So, how would you tell someone who's kind of like interested or curious about doing this work a super simple, easy way to start?
Yeah. And not everyone needs to sit down or lie down, especially if they're in active trauma or they're in grief or something like that. So the first thing is just to acknowledge that and to start small. If this is something of interest, start small. And I think the fastest way for us to come into contact with our higher selves is in nature. And right now we're in the beginning of summer, so most of the Northern Hemisphere should be able to be accessible outdoors. And so go touch a tree, go walk on grass, look at trees, look at the sky. I am sitting east facing and there's a forest right here. And so reconnecting back with nature can bring us back to our essence very, very quickly. Because the thing about nature is that there is no hurry. Like it's just unfolding. I mean, even the birds, there's no hurry. They're just going from one place to the other. And so, like, that rhythm can really be very mystically attractive if we let it be. If we let it be.
So go outside for a walk, do it maybe without AirPods, without listening to a podcast, maybe just at least 5 minutes of your walk with nothing on,
That's
and
it.
just observe what you hear, observe what you see, and
That's
just
it.
be present to it.
That's it. And that's mindfulness, right? Or just choose to be device free for a certain period of time. There'll be dings and pings that you don't need to pay attention to. And then, if you choose to do a meditation, I think the simplest one is just a breath meditation, is to set your timer for 3 minutes and just follow your breath and notice what happens within the body when you're just following your breath. And then when that feels like it's not enough, you can move it to 5 to 6 to 7 to 8. And then when you've kind of gone through all the apps and all that and you need a teacher, you turn to Vanessa and you start to explore some of those things.
And you turn to Raj. So we are, listen, we need to wrap this up because we've been talking for a long time and I would love to just talk to you for another couple of hours, but I also want to be mindful of the fact that our folks have stuff that they get to do today. So I want to just deeply, deeply bow of gratitude. Thank you, thank you, thank you for sharing all of your wisdom with us today, for showing up today. For those of you listening, this is a part 1 of 2 episodes. You'll hear the second part, which is Rashmi and I talking some more next week. So if you're interested in this, keep an eye out for the next episode. And just thank you so much, Dr. Rashmi Schramm. Where can folks find you if they're interested?
Yeah, thank you for allowing me to be here, Vanessa. It's just my name is my website. It's just rashmischramm.com. And it's the same on all sort of social media platforms. And then, of course, my podcast is Inner Peace and Power, where you rocked the stage this last week. It was fantastic.
And it's rashmischrammmd.com. That's your website,
It's
right?
actually just rashmischramm.com because there were
Perfect.
M's if you put the MD in there, and it's very confusing.
Okay. And I'm going to link all of this in the show notes. But thank you again, Rashmi. And thank you all so much for being here and for just being super curious and for being open. And I just want to remind all of you listening that skepticism is one of the healthiest things that we can hold as humans. And it's so important to be skeptical. But true skepticism requires a curiosity because the opposite of that is cynicism. And cynicism doesn't feel good in the body, but curiosity does. And so I hope all of you continue to be incredibly open and curious and start accessing a lot of these tools and practices for yourself and just notice how they make you feel. Thank you again for being here. I will see you all next week. Adios. Hey friends, if this episode resonated, please take a quick second and leave a review, share it with a friend, or post it to your community. It's how we keep helping others who are walking a similar path, and how together we grow the movement of consciousness in business, leadership, and life. Thank you again for being here, and I'll see you next week.